two snakes coming together. Let me know if you get the movie reference. For those who haven't played along before, the Instagram takes the first little shot of this video and puts it into my post. So whatever stupid thing I'm doing right at the start of this video, that's what the actual post will have on it. So that's today's stupid thing. Let me know if you know what movie that's from. It's one of my favorites. It's probably up there. I reckon probably top 3 of my favorite films of all time. Anyway, that's not what this is about today. This is about the SitRep. Let me just drop that one down. All right. SitRep on Instagram and YouTube's. I'm still working on proliferating this out to other platforms. What the fuck is going on with YouTube there? Hey, there we go. Oh, I swore. That's a joke. I swear all the time. Okay, so this is where I go through, for those who haven't watched these before, I go through stories that have piqued my interest in the past 24 hours and have a chat about them. Usually I try and give you a reference to where roughly they're from or what kind of source it is. And then maybe a bit of information on what I think about these stories. So there is, slight opinion that's built in there too. So take that for what it is, because I'm just one dude and it's just my opinion, and feel free to argue with that opinion if you wish, because I am a big believer of free speech and I really like to hear other people's opinions on stuff. And sometimes I get shit wrong too. So there you go. Anyway, we look at this from the perspective of prepping. So how do we keep ourselves more prepared or better prepared for an unknown or uncertain future, or, as I am predicting, possibly a slightly harder future than we've had. We've had an age of comfort. We've had an age of easy, of plenty, of surplus for many, many years now. What I think we are now heading into is maybe a little bit more scarcity than people are used to, a little bit of surplus for many, many years now. What I think we are now heading into is maybe a little bit more scarcity than people are used to, a little bit more hardship, maybe, than people are used to. And as one of my favorite YouTube video creators often calls it, and that is from Canadian Prepper. So if you haven't checked out his videos, I recommend go and check me out, Canadian Prepper on YouTube. He calls it the age of consequence, which I think is quite right. Coffee. Okay, so it is the 15th of June. I should have started with that. It's 15th of June, everyone, 2022, and it is currently 22 minutes past 12 in the afternoon. We are now after the noon. In here, Australia, the eastern seaboard, you might notice that I'm back in my office. I'm no longer in that big, horrible city that I've been in working for the last week or so. I'm now back in my rural hometown. I feel a lot more comfortable. I feel a lot more relaxed. I feel better. Life is better here. It is a lot colder. It is freezing. It is literally freezing. I had to go break some ice off one of the water catchment devices out the back this morning. Rambodian, good thing you're watching CP, Canadian Prepper. Awesome. Cool. Keep watching. I like his stuff. And oddly enough, I watch his stuff and I'm like, oh, wow, I just talked about that in my SitRep today. So pretty aligned. We're obviously looking at similar sources. I like that. And he gives sometimes slightly different views on these sort of things, and he researches into these things slightly differently as well. So it's good to get other perspectives on the crap that I'm talking about. All right, let's jump into it today. There is a lot of stuff as per usual. And I didn't go through it. Sometimes I get these things in order and I put them in clumps, nicely ordered. I didn't go through it this morning, so this is just going to be like my caffeinated brain is at the moment, just firing. What the fuck is this about? All right, let's start off in South Korea. Trucker strike in South Korea sparks economic turmoil, risks global spillover. The epicenter of the next global supply chain snarl could be in South Korea as a nationwide trucker strike broadens and is hindering domestic economic activity, which may spill over to the rest of the world. And when they're talking about spilling over here, I think this is just adding into what we're already seeing. So obviously we've got some pretty big issues when it comes to supply chains throughout the world. And anything that adds to that is exacerbating an already inflamed situation. And this is just yet another thing. So I'm always looking out for this sort of stuff that's happening. South Korea, I want to say, is like maybe fifth or sixth biggest economy in the world, or somewhere around there. I'm pretty sure they're in top 10. They're a pretty big economy in of themselves. I could be totally off the mark from that, but I'm pretty sure they're a big economy. And things are always changing. I'm pretty sure it's like US, China, Japan, Germany's top 5, maybe South Korea just sits outside of that top 5. I'm not really sure. Anyway, if you do know, let me know. But they're a big deal. They're kind of a big deal. So this is about sort of union type strikes. I have noticed a number. I haven't actually collated these stories, but I have noticed anecdotally a number of stories that are about union type strikes or activities that are happening right now. And I think unions are using right now to push their agendas, to get their needs met, whatever it is that they're trying to do. Whether you like unions or you don't, me, I'm a bit like yes and no. I can see that like coalitions for fair working rights and things like that is okay. I just really fucking hate communism, and unions just smack of communism. So for me anyway. Yeah, so anyway, I see a lot of this sort of stuff happening at the moment, that unions are kind of looking at this and going like, everyone's in a bad position. Companies are in a really bad, tenuous position right now. Let's fuck them. Let's really turn the screws up and like, hey, we're not going to work right now. And companies like, we like desperately need workers right now. And they're like, well, pay up, because inflation. Yeah, well, inflation's working across the board. Everyone needs to get paid more. Everyone gets paid more. Things cost more. It's none of this is heading in a good direction. If you even understand inflation from the most basic sense of let's look at Australia. Let's look at the price of I don't know, a packet of chips, a packet of durries. No, let's not go durries. Let's go some milk or something in Australia, right? Now, Australia passed laws which increased our minimum wage, and we have consistently done that for decades now. We have a pretty good minimum wage here in Australia, and if you disagree with that, then I think you're an idiot. But I think there are ways to argue against it. In that, well, it doesn't afford me enough to live life. Well, here's the catch-22 from that. You increase the minimum wage so everyone gets paid more, and then the shopkeeper goes, well, I have to pay people more, which means I have to charge more for my goods, i.e. my milk. Plus, I know everyone's got more money, so we can charge more for this. And there is this evening out, but the evening out is up. And so that price of milk goes up. And then we all look at that and go like, whoa, I can't afford this. So let's increase minimum wage. Oh, okay. Well, the minimum wage employee at the supermarket again has to get paid more, which means the supermarket has to get that money somewhere. So they're going to increase the price of milk, and it goes up. And then everyone starts complaining. I can't afford milk. Well, let's increase the minimum wage. You see where this is going. This whole thing's a self-licking ice cream that continues on. This is the system we live in. It's infinitely more complex than that, but just in a very basic sense, that's what we're looking at here. So when we're looking at things like government handouts, when we're looking at things like increasing pay, when we're looking at things like capping the amount that companies can charge for goods, then we're looking at pretty dire circumstances. These are all symptoms of something that is very, very ill at the core there. And I'll get onto this price capping thing because it is big for Australians especially. We'll get there. All right, so anyway, what's happening here? South Korea, supply chain shortages. We've had them. They're going to increase. Like I keep saying, how do we best prepare ourselves as preparedness-minded individuals or groups? We need to think about the things that we can get in now and get them in now, because in the next 6 months, we might not get access to these sorts of things. All right. Let's talk about so many stories. Okay, let's talk about China. China had a bit of a flip out. The WHO came out and said the lab leak theory, for those who don't know what that is, it's this theory that possibly that big global funk, the cooties that we had for 2 years called COVID may have come out of a lab, which is located in China. Anyway, China's done a lot to quell this theory, and anyone who says it gets punished pretty bad. But anyway, the WHO has come out and said, look, it just needs further study. That's all. We're not saying you did do it, you didn't do it. You know, we're not saying anything like that. It just needs further study. And China reacted like a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum. Essentially, they've flipped out. They've come out. They've made comments like the lab leak theory is a total lie concocted by anti-China forces for political purposes. I beg to differ. This word science keeps getting bandied around. I beg to differ. This word science keeps getting bandied around by people at the moment. I can't quite see my comments sometimes, but Magnolia Homestead, how you doing? South Korea is 10th in the world, 1.63 trillion annual GDP. There you go. They're in the top 10. That's a pretty big deal. If they start clogging up their economy, as what looks like it's going to happen from those trucker strikes, then that's going to have flow-on effects to the rest of the world. All right, back into China. They're flipping out. China, this just adds into the bigger picture of China, where what I'm seeing is they are becoming more and more emboldened. They're becoming more aggressive with the way they stance and the way they state all their information, basically coming out and saying this sort of stuff like, you cannot say that, there's nothing you can do. Couple this in with what they're doing in and around the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and Taiwan airspace itself. Like, this is all leading to a much more aggressive and pushy China, I would say. That's my take in it. If we rewind back to the 90s, China actually made some overtures towards Taiwan, and US basically came out and said, get back in your box. And China went, ooh, yep, back in our box. Now, fast forward to 2022, and China is just doing what it wants, and US is saying, get back in your box. And China's like, come and make me, mate. Come on. You want a piece of this? Hold my beer. Let's do this. And US is now going like, yeah, well, we're gonna do this. Are we gonna do this? Is this happening? But all this sort of stuff, I'm always looking at like the statements that come out of China, because it is super aggressive and they're super pushy. And I don't think I have the story. Let me just fast forward to the end of the playbook here. No, I don't have the story, but it was a super interesting one about China and what they were doing to protesters. So I didn't catch the full story. I wish I had it written down here, but I will look into it a bit more. But essentially, some people were organizing some sort of protest, which was something along the lines of trying to draw down money out of banks, doing a bit of a run on the banks. China, the CCP, the party, got a hold of it and just like red flagged them from a health stance. Just went like, you're now you're red zoned in the health status. You know, the whole social credit system, the whole interconnected system, and basically just locked those people down and gave them no means to do what they were doing through digital means as well. It was terribly frightening. I read the first couple of paragraphs of it, and we're like, well, that's terribly frightening. I need to actually read that a bit more and then probably present that as its own little thing, because that has deeper ties to it. That's talking about central bank digital currencies and what they can do with them. It's talking about social credit systems and what they can do with them. All these things tie together, and we're talking about a totalitarian government that at a whim, and they just prove that they do it to their own people. We're just like, I don't like what you're saying. You're done. You can't do anything. You have no money right now. You have no access to money. You cannot leave your house. We will enforce it. We have the laws to do it. So that's all pretty disturbing stuff when we start to add all this up. Rambodian says, I had a friend in China who came home when they unlocked briefly who said China has, for a while now, said the virus was released by the US. I have heard that, yes. He came home as he said it's no good there now. Well, I think that's probably pretty, I would say, a wise decision from my perspective, looking from the outside in. I don't really know. I'm not in Shanghai. I'm not in China at all and never have been. So I can't exactly say what's happening on the ground, but from all reports on the ground, it does not look like a good situation. And I would probably recommend that people just get out of there. Good morning, Take the Ride says Justin Trudeau is trying to take Canada on the same Chinese credit system. Yeah, I can see the temptation for a number of governments to start doing this. In fact, there's been some overtures for it in Australia, especially within my state of New South Wales. Different types of systems, but this has been foreshadowed already, and this is something that I would stress to people that we should be very wary. Would be the nice way I would put it to people who maybe weren't so on the fringe. In reality, I would say this is definitely something we've got to fight against and say no, absolutely no. And as a prepper, what I'm starting to think about is, okay, well, what happens if my state or my country starts to push ahead with this sort of stuff? What can I do? How can I work around this? How can I actually get outside of that system? So I'm taking steps now, and I'm starting to think about that. And I'm going, yeah, I still live a life, and I still have, bank accounts and pay taxes, and I do all the normal sort of stuff. But what else? What do I need to start building as another path of divergence that I know that I can switch to if the state starts to go down that sort of road there? All right. Let's jump over into Europe now. Belarus has prepared an application for membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I have not been over this, just FYI. I'd seen something about this, but this is the first time I'd seen the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So the SCO. I talk about these federations that are being built up from all the naughty kids over in the naughty corner. So all the sanctioned countries, all the countries that are sort of on the outer, all the countries that still want to deal with Russia, are kind of like formulating into their own little alliance and organization over here. And this is another thing. It's absolutely no surprise though, Belarus, like, I don't even know why we call it Belarus. We should just call it Russia from now on, because it essentially is. Magnolia Homestead, because Trudeau is of the World Economic Forum, any of them that attend or follow WEF are all going to push the social credits. Indeed. I think you're probably quite right there. What else is happening in Russia? So we're looking at Western sources where we're seeing that Russia is failing at the war, that it's there almost Russia is failing at the war, that it's there almost on the point of capitulation, that their country is up in revolt and open revolt against their leader, that they're crippled, the people are starving, they can't do anything. And it's almost over, and US is going to continue fighting the good fight by pushing as much funds and weapons into Ukraine for as long as possible. So it's all good, great. We've won the war. It's already it's a fait accompli. It's done, right? Well, maybe not so much, because if you look at any other source that isn't on the Western peg, that isn't totally on the of Western mainstream media, then you start to see a very different picture. So I like to say, I haven't probably said this in a little while, the sources that I look at, I try and cast as wide a net as possible. I do look at Russian propaganda. I'm not pro-Russian. I'm not pro-West. I'm pro-me. And I want to try and gather as much information as I can to make me safe, to make my family safe, and to make my community safe. That's what I'm concerned about. So anytime I'm turning a blind eye to one section of information, even though I know they might be outright lying, if I'm turning myself away from it, it creates these huge blind spots that I can't see. So always try and open that up. This source, I don't know exactly where they lie. It is somebody who has been in the past very anti-Russian with their writings. It's just a personal Telegram account. So they've been very kind of they're not pro-Ukraine, but they are very anti-Russian. They were very against the invasion right from the start. However, they do live there. They live in this area and they're seeing things that are happening. This little thing popped up. Steel prices in Russia have fallen 40% since January. So have a think right now of all the things that you buy. If you're like me, maybe you're going out and buying materials like little construction materials and things like that, tools, hardware stuff, food, fuel, cars, whatever you're buying right now, whatever it is. Just let me know how much of that in Australia or New Zealand or the US or the UK or wherever you're watching this from, how much of that has dropped? No. The silence is deafening. There's nothing that has really dropped. I mean, there's a whole bunch of electrical goods that are on the end of financial year sales at the moment, a whole heap of like consumer goods and things like that are kind of on sale right now because of a number of reasons, but companies are struggling out there and they need to make some bucks. They need to move the stock that they pulled in over the shortages that they found at the start of the pandemic. So what's fallen 40%? Let me put it that way. There is very little out there that would have fallen 40%, especially not something to do with construction. I can tell you that for sure in Australia. Absolutely not. I would say the opposite and probably then some. Like lumber has gone up some crazy amount. I think like last time I checked, there was a 170% increase in certain lumber products. That's not your spine, that's pieces of wood, right? So, what are we seeing here? The more I look at outside information, outside mainstream media information from the West, the more I see that Russia isn't the picture that a lot of us are being painted. That they're not on that verge of collapse, that their shelves might even be more full than ours with cheaper products than ours. And their national currency might even be doing better than ours. What's the reason for that? Well, here's another little link for you. Russia has become India's second largest oil supplier. So this was no surprise if you've listened to me before talk about this. India just oil supplier. So this was no surprise if you've listened to me before talk about this. India has been looking at Russia, or as I like to call it, the Great Russian Garage Sale, where they are just like, comrades, cheap oil. You want oil, you want gas, you get it. Make offer, no price too cheap. India's looking at that and going, cashing in, I'm cashing in. China's looking at that and going, yep. Pakistan's looking at that and going, yep. We've got a whole heap of countries that are looking at that and going, yeah, actually, we need that. In fact, there's even European countries within the EU, even within NATO, that are looking at that and going like, we kind of need that right now. So yeah, this whole idea that Russia's crippled, I'm not buying it. Not buying it at all. Which tells me also that the conflict that we're seeing, there are other reasons about this as well, other indications that give me this idea. But this is one of the big ones where I think this conflict in Ukraine it's not going away. It's not going to end in a month or two. This is going to be sustained. This is going to be long term, unless something drastic changes, i.e., Ukraine capitulates, or it significantly ramps up. But if it continues going the way it's going to continue going the way it's going for quite some time. And the fact that even the US came out, I think this was just a little them not really thinking about it. They're like, oh, we want to put the message out to the people that we're going to be there for the long haul because we're going to win this. All right. So they came out yesterday and said, we're 100% backing Ukraine. We will continue to pump money into there, to continue to put weapons in there for as long as it takes. And what most people should have then turned around and gone, what do you mean as long as it takes? Didn't you say that this was almost over? Don't you keep telling us that they're at the point of capitulation, that they're about to be done? Why are you saying as long as it takes? That should have been a warning sign for people. But a lot of either the mainstream media is willfully blind to this. They're going, oh, yep, let's continue on the good news. Or another theory of mine is that the level of journalism today is so pathetic that the average person, not just journalist, but person who just happens to go into that field, is so poor at critical thinking that all they can do is receive information, pass it on. Receive information, pass it on. There's actually no critical thinking to what they're actually reporting. All right. I'm going to skip over that because I already talked about that. Let's talk about price caps. I'm going to skip over that because I already talked about that. Let's talk about price capping stuff. Let's talk about what happens when you get an organization or a government that says to an industry that you can only charge X amount of dollars. Now, this is pretty much taken straight from the pages of this book here, which I understand this is backwards. But that says Atlas Shrugged. And again, I will recommend to people to go and read that. It's a big read, right? A lot of words in there. It's like a 1,000-page book. But once you start to get into it, you will start to understand how narrow-minded this sort of thinking is. In Australia, one of these mechanisms was, hey, energy companies, you're charging too much. Here's your cap. And energy companies like, well, because of the increases of prices of gas and coal and blah, blah, around the world, that cap is actually half of wholesale. And, the governing bodies said, well, people can't afford fuel, so that's what the price is. And so they said, all right, cool. Well, we can't just operate losing money, because then we'd go broke and then no one would have electricity. So what we'll do is we'll curtail the electricity that we make. We'll make it, we'll short it. We'll go this amount of electricity. And then surprise, surprise, they have to come out and say, by the way, there could be blackouts. So I talked about this yesterday. It came out as a big shock to people where 2 nights ago, the AEMO, the Australian Electricity something organization, what was it called? The Australian Energy Market Operator, AEMO, came out and said, could be some shortfalls in your electricity. What does that mean in your electricity? What does that mean? Shortfalls? Yeah, some blackouts and stuff. Don't worry about it. Well, people should worry about that. We've got a system. We pay, I would say, above a fair amount for the systems that we have here in Australia. So for them to get slapped in the face as the end user, the consumer, and say, hey, by the way, yeah, we can't, no, you can't access that right now. Sorry. I think it's pretty poor. It's pretty poor. But that's essentially what we've got happening. This is now extended out. So at first it was Queensland. They said, parts of Queensland. Okay, parts of Queensland and maybe some of New South Wales. Now they've come out and they've actually said, where have they? Potential power interruptions were forecast for Tasmania, South Australia, and Victoria as well tomorrow evening. But the notices relating to South Australia and Tasmania were cancelled later on Tuesday. So I don't know how many people were actually affected by this. There were reports this morning of thousands of people within New South Wales without power overnight. This is something that I think should be concerning. Is this a temporary thing? Well, possibly not. This could be something that's going to continue happening. The crazy thing is that, like I said, this has happened because of artificial caps on limits on the amount that somebody can charge for something. So it's not even like as an individual, I can go, well, you know what? I know electricity is expensive, but I need it. So for this month at least, I will pay 50% more, 70% more, whatever it is. Interesting involved in all this as well. I was talking to one of my sources, and they were talking about how they used to work somewhere that would, and this is years and years ago, so this has been a standard thing within Australia, where the Australian energy sector does not create enough energy for everyone to use. So these big businesses that they know have huge, large diesel generators, so that if the power did go off, they can continue running. That the energy organization actually would come into these other businesses and say, hey, from here to here, you have to run your generator and pump it back into the grid because we need it. So this is actually something that's been happening for a while. When I read something like this, I didn't understand it the other day, that they actually came out and they said, oh, we're going to have a shortfall in Queensland. And then they put out 2 energy generators to bring the supply back up. And I said, what? Energy generators? What are they talking about? Apparently, this is what they're talking about, that they go to these big businesses and say, hey, for the next 3 weeks, you have to run your generator constantly and pump that energy back into the grid. Do it. What's that generator run off? Diesel. Diesel's pretty cheap at the moment, isn't it? I'm sure that's not going to cost these companies huge amounts. I'm sure it's not going to have rippling effects that we couldn't possibly understand. Sorry, I'm just missing some comments here. Russia knows Ukraine is a gold mine, so to speak, coal, steel, petroleum products, chemicals, machinery, barley, corn, wheat, nickel, cobalt, etc. One of the big things is natural gas. They found huge natural gas supplies in and around Ukraine. They found them in, I want to say, 2013. What happened in 2014? Crimea. After Crimea, what happened? Donbass region kicked up. And now we're seeing the flow-on effect of that. So there's a whole heap of reasons why Russia would want to go in there and stay in there. But one of them was Russia owns natural gas throughout Europe. And all of a sudden Ukraine was like, oh, hey, we got a whole bunch of natural gas here all of a sudden. Russia's like, niet, we have natural gas. And Ukraine's like, no, I'm pretty sure we've got it. It's like, niet, comrade, come here. I'm sorry, I apologize about my shitty accents. Do you all have, so this is from Magnolia Homestead again, do you all have laws requiring you to be connected to the power grid and then pay a base fee? We have that here. So even if you have solar here, you still have to pay the power company a base fee. Yes, we do have that. So it's kind of packaged under this thing called utilities. If you want to look at it another way, you buy a property, you build a house on it, or you buy the house on it, or whatever. You own that, except for utilities, which is kind of like you're paying rent to the government anyway. So you've got to pay these utilities 4 times a year. And if you don't pay it, they'll come and take your house. And if you refuse to get out of your house, then they will force you out of your house, and they will use police officers who are armed. So that's why I always say that violence is the gold standard. It is the fundamental baseline standard for our society. We think we are so highly evolved and developed here in Australia, in the US, and countries like that. But essentially, our governments still hold us to ransom at gunpoint if you push it far enough. But yes, we essentially have that too. So you still have to pay for utilities. So you can actually technically build a house that doesn't utilize town water, doesn't utilize town electricity, doesn't utilize town sewage system, and you will still have to pay for those connections. Who made that system up? Certainly wasn't me. It was probably the people who are benefiting from it. i.e. the government. All right, continuing on. This was a great story. I've got kind of good news. I like to chuck in like things that excite me. So I sent this from a source, and then I found it popped up in another one of my feeds. But Sri Lanka is obviously in a state of hurt at the moment, and I'm very wary of what's happening in Sri Lanka. This is the sort of thing that I think will start to happen in a number of other countries, but Sri Lanka is a really good example of what's happening on the bad sense of things at the moment. They've run out of money. They've got no money. They've got a problem there, all right? So they are a net importer of goods. In order to import goods, you need money. If you have no money, you can't import goods, which means you don't have goods. And when I say goods, I'm talking about fuel, pretty important. I'm talking about food. It's pretty important. I'm talking about medical supplies. Yep, that's pretty important. So what's happening in Sri Lanka? The government's coming up. Crisis hit Sri Lanka is asking civil servants to take an extra day off each week to grow crops in their backyards in a bid to forestall a looming food shortage. The island nation's unprecedented economic downturn has left several staple foods in short supply, along with petrol and medicines, and rampant inflation is ravaging household budgets. It's amazing what kind of information and what people do when they're desperate enough. It's amazing what kind of information and what people do when they're desperate enough. And like, this is the sort of thing that I would love to hear from our governments right now, saying, hey, Aussies, Kiwis, Yanks, Americans, Canadians, Angles, Saxons, all of you, the peoples of the world, get into your backyards and start gardening now. Okay, start doing it. That's why I say it every single time I get on here, and I'm going to go do it today because I got home and my poor potato crop has been decimated, so I need to go dig up what's left of it. But I will be in the garden today and doing this, and I cannot recommend highly enough that you do this. We should all be doing this now. Dedicate a day, if you will. I mean, gardening actually, it doesn't take that long. It can be somewhat difficult in parts, but it's really not. You can do it in like at a real stretch, like maybe 2 hours in a week, and you could have a pretty good garden growing. And if you put in more, you'll get more out of it. So get into your garden. Do what Sri Lanka is doing. Don't wait till we're at the point where Sri Lanka is at in order to do this. Do it today. But good on them for doing it. Illinois in the USA. Illinois in the USA is at risk of brownouts. I don't really like that term. Sounds like falling into a vat of shit or something. Brownout. Electricity costs soar across much of Illinois as risks of brownouts loom. So they're looking at the same sort of issue there. This isn't just a New South Wales, it isn't just an Australian thing. This is happening all over the world right now. Electricity costs, fuel costs, energy costs are all going through the roof. And that has consequences more than just like, oh, I've got to pay more for this thing, whatever it is. No, that's the best case scenario in reality. Like, oh, fuel costs more and I've got to pay more for it. That's the best thing, really, if it costs more than it's there. If it's not available, this is a bad thing. If it starts getting rationed, this is a bad thing. And this is what we're going to start seeing. So I think, unfortunately, this is some of the stuff that we're going to start seeing more and more frequently. And this is going to be normalized very quickly by us. In that another blackout, or it's almost 6 p.m. Quick, turn off all the stuff because we've got our 3 hours of brownout coming scheduled in now in our electricity rationing cycle within our state. This is the sort of thing that I'm seeing coming. So again, proof yourself against this. If you generate your own electricity, then you don't have to worry about what our asinine governments are or are not doing. So I have a solar setup specifically set up for my drop freezer. All All right, it doesn't even really get used by much. I plug things into it every now and then, but it is a relatively large-ish system, but it is just there to power my every now and then, but it is a relatively large-ish system, but it is just there to power my drop freezer, because that is filled with meats and other frozen goods, things that I've gone out and hunted, things that I've bought off people, off other local farmers that they've butchered for me. It's filled with that sort of meat, which will sustain me and my family and my friends and my mutual assistance group for X amount of time. And that is something that absolutely I do not want to lose, because of something that I had nothing to do with, really, because of some sort of policy that the government put in, because some company was irresponsible with how they were doing things. You know, all these things that are outside of my control, I can't do anything about it. What can I control? I can create my own energy system right here, and it doesn't cost that much to do it right now. So yeah, think about doing that, because these electricity issues, they're not going to be getting better. Here's the story. Thousands of Sydney homes plunged into darkness as Aussie price cap policy sparks energy shortage. Quote, the price cap unintentionally means that some plants can't recover their fuel costs. Participants are legitimately seeking ways to resolve the problem. Like, unintentionally means that some plants can't recover their fuel costs. How that's unintentional, like how you can't understand that that would have happened, is beyond me. It is so basic that it is. I obviously find it frustrating that they would say this sort of stuff. All right, let's talk about. Oh, there's that China story. Biden admin announces the release of another 45 million barrels of crude oil from the strategic petroleum reserves. So their reserves of fuel that their country has built up. Biden's been releasing it, and he's been releasing it basically to ease the price, or trying to ease the price at the pump for individuals, and so industry can keep moving ahead and keep working. The problem being with a strategic petroleum reserve is that essentially what that's built up for as a core idea is if your country was to go into a big war and couldn't get any more fuel in, you're going to need to fuel your army in order to secure fuel coming in again. So they're now at a 35-year low in their reserves. But it's a good thing that US has absolutely zero chance of being in any sort of war anytime soon, right? Multiple places here in the US are experiencing brownouts and blackouts from Magnolia Homestead. Oh, yep. It's happening. We are developed countries. We are at the peak of developed countries, really. We're pretty high. Australia per capita is one of the richest countries on earth. Our GDP isn't anything like too exciting, but the fact that already we're being hit by these things. One of the things for me was, I have said for a long time, hey, as Aussies, don't stress about it too much. We've got a lot of padding here. We've got a lot of systems here. We'll be okay for a little bit. And all of a sudden, I'm getting hit by this sort of information and these sort of actions, and I'm like, ooh, mea culpa. I may have stuffed up here. My timeline could be way out. All right. I'll always try to admit when I'm wrong, and this sort of stuff is starting to show me that maybe I was a little bit out with my timeline. Maybe things are happening faster, or Australia is not as resilient as I thought it was. And again, coming from the US, the price here keeps causing increases by ending federal drilling and pump leases. Right, yeah. So government policy there, where I've talked about this in the past, where I'm all for green technologies. I'm all for a bright, better future where we have things that aren't polluting our world, things that aren't actively destroying our environment. and things that are renewable. Like, it's a one-way street with our energy at the moment. We pull it up, we burn it, we use it, and then it's gone. So me thinking about like long time, future, we need to move towards a sustainable or regenerative sort of system. And I'm all for that. I just think it's so stupid to think that you can flick a switch and do that overnight when we are totally dependent on fossil fuels. So these sort of policies where we're like, no more fuel can come out of the ground here in the US. We're cutting off this and we're cutting off that, and we're going to go green. We're forcing it upon everyone. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but like, can green actually do that? No, not right now. It cannot do that right now. There are a whole heap of reasons why. I would love for it to be different. I really would. I'd love for the solar panels that we have to be so efficient and magic that they can pull in enough energy for everyone to do whatever they're doing, or you mount them on the top of your car and it runs your car. But there are hard realities. There are physics that actually stop that from happening. Okay, it's called science. We just do not have the technology to do it right now. So the unintended consequences, we can only use that for so long, I think, but these unintended consequences are that, like, it ripples into countries like the US and increases fuel price through the roof. But that doesn't just stay within the US, that ripples out. Is there any reason that natural gas should be so expensive in Australia when we're a net exporter of it? Well, no, but because the world price is expensive, ours is expensive too. So, these sort of policies that happen in other countries that, in all likelihood, probably theoretically shouldn't affect other countries like Australia. It does immediately too. And rips through the stock market and does all sorts of other things. Let's go down to Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, including problems with their water mains. Apparently, 165,000 people in West Texas could be without water for days after a main break. 165,000 people in West Texas could be without water for days after a main breaks, and that timing couldn't be any worse for them. A water main break in West Texas could leave 165,000 people, residents, in and around Odessa with little or no water for 48 hours, officials said Tuesday, water being one of the most important things that we can have. I just got a brand new, what did I do with it? Here we are. Brand new Grail. I don't work for Grail. I'm not advertising for Grail. I like their stuff. I also use Life Straw filters, personal filters. I use water filters as I'm a gear bandit, right? I've got heaps of gear. There's so much gear around me right now. It's crazy. Like, there's axes up there, and there's grab bags down there, and there's med kits here, and blah blah blah. I've got heaps of stuff. The thing I use the most is a water filter bottle. I don't like to drink my town water. It's shitty. So I've got a home filter system. When I'm out and about, I use one of these. So I just got the bigger one. This is the Ultra. This is the GeoPress, the big version. This is the Ultra Press. I use that. Again, I don't work for Grail. I'm not paid for them. I had to buy that. I bought it from mountaindesigns.com.au. Mountain Designs, Australian company that has an online sort of camping store. I don't work for them either. I don't work for anyone. But hey, if you do know any like sweet deals that are going that people need, or sponsors or anything like that, then I'm down for it. I'll do it. I'll do it for gear. I'll do anything for the gear. Not that kind of gear. This kind of gear. Anyway, West Texas, Odessa, West Texas. 165,000 people, though, without water. 165,000 individuals without water for up to 2 days. That's a big freaking deal, all right? This kind of stuff terrifies me. Texas, I feel, has just been getting walloped in the last couple of years. Is it just me? Is it more information? Does Texas always get, like, hammered? But I feel like between the freezing temperatures and drought, they had some fires as well. like water sort of stuff that's going on there. Like, I mean, there's stuff going on all over the US at the moment, and mainly like in and around that drought sort of thing, I think so. But not so much. If we go north, let's go north to I would argue probably my favorite part of the US. And I'm sorry if you live somewhere else. I would argue probably my favorite part of the US. And I'm sorry if you live somewhere else in the US and you love it there. But I haven't been everywhere in the US. I haven't been to anywhere around the South, apart from Texas, or that sort of southern sort of area, like Appalachian type area. I've been on the East Coast, the Northeast. I've been in the middle, Colorado, and up. So Wyoming, Montana, and that's what I'm talking about now, or I'm about to talk about. I've been in the Pacific Northwest. I've been on the West Coast. I've toured around some of those other states like Arizona and New Mexico as well, and Utah. But I would say of the limited experience I have there, Montana was definitely one of my favorite places. Montana, Wyoming, definitely one of my favorite places. Even Idaho, people bag Idaho out. I'm just like, this place is all right. and obviously I love Colorado too. I like cold places. I like mountains. So now it's all starting to make sense. Anyway, what's been happening up there? Floods up in Yellowstone. Yellowstone, not the TV series, the excellent TV series in Montana, but Yellowstone, the national park. Massive floods. That's not it. There's another one. Where are these floods gone? Where are we? Here we are. Record flooding forces closure of Yellowstone National Park. The Yellowstone area is experiencing major flooding. Bridges are being washed away. Roads are collapsing. And access in and out of the northern range has been blocked. I've come in through that northern range. I exited through the southern area into the Grand Tetons, which I would recommend people don't go there right now. Obviously, it's flooding, but this is where I would recommend people go, if anywhere. There's images of some of the cabins and houses being swept away in floods. So I'm feeling for the people here. Australia, we obviously get smashed with floods. We've had some huge ones recently. Floods and fires in Australia is pretty synonymous with Australia, and US, you're copping it there. So I'm thinking about you guys over there. I'm feeling for you guys. You got drought in areas. You got fires, massive fires in like New Mexico. And I think areas you got fires, massive fires in like New Mexico. And I think Arizona area. You got floods there as well. So stay safe. All the Yanks out there. All the Yanks out there. By the way, when I say Yanks, that's an Aussie term, which just generally means anyone from America. I know in America, when you say Yanks, you're talking about somebody who's probably in that kind of New York type area. So I apologize if you're offended by that. What happens when you have been using runs out? And what you have been using runs out and you can't afford the alternative, they're trying to shove down your throat. People get desperate, they'll afford the alternative, they're trying to shove down your throat. People get desperate, they'll start borrowing. That's what the World Economic Forum wants. That's from Take the Ride. Essentially, yeah, that's where I feel we're getting pushed into at the moment. We've got increasing prices of everything. Housing prices in Australia have been insane for years now. That like years and years, and progressively more and more people are priced out of the market to the point where it's almost at the point of ridiculousness. It has to correct if they want people to continue buying houses in Australia. It has to. But where are they forcing us into? They're forcing us into a place. I mean, I don't generally talk about like big conspiracy theories that there's a cabal of people or there's like an Illuminati of 12 hooded figures around a table going, how are we going to get them? I think my personal opinion is that actually, I think it's just market forces and human beings doing what humans do, and it's usually greed and fear that's driving a lot of these things. We can attribute some things to some people, but there are reasons why we get to the places where we get to. A lot of the time, it's not necessarily good reasons, and that doesn't excuse anything that's happening. But yeah, we are heading towards a point where you will own nothing and you will be happy. You know what? I have had a point in my life where I did own nothing. I wasn't happy. Nothing and you will be happy. You know what? I have had a point in my life where I did own nothing. I wasn't happy. Just saying. And I think that's kind of what is happening now. We've been getting hit with this "you will own nothing and you will be happy" sort of rhetoric on and off. I think they're actually just dropping it now, and they're going to go. The new one that'll come out is "you will own nothing." Yeah, sorry, I was finished. That's it. You will just own nothing. I don't care if you're happy or not. That's basically what they're saying. But you're not going to own anything. So have fun with that. That's what we're traveling towards. All right, on with the stories. More flooding in Russia. So Voronezh. They issued a yellow weather warning of floods. So we can see streets in that city totally submerged, cars going under, stuff like that. Again, I always like to throw out, for those who haven't watched this before, I always like to throw out weather effects. I think this is probably one of the more important things to concentrate on as a prepper, really building your preparedness psyche around weather effects. There are a whole heap of other things, yes, and we should prepare for all things, but me being an Aussie, I'm always pretty wary about our weather because it has a nasty habit of unsing us. So I think weather effects are going to become more prolific and more dangerous as we go on in time now. So the things that we're facing are going to get bigger and worse. These are the sort of things that I want to keep your attention on a little bit to prepare for. Start thinking about it. What are you going to do if flood hits? Where are you going to go? Are you going to stay at home? Are you going to leave? Do you have the ability to leave? Do you have anywhere to go? Do you have things like grab bags or things organized that you can pack a car quickly and leave? Can you leave early? Are you monitoring certain things to be aware of what's going on? Do you know how to look at things like your local river heights and stuff like that? Just for example, for flooding, okay? So this is all stuff that I think about and that I've got set up. And I would encourage you to do so much, but the problem is if the volcano blows in Yellowstone, it'll wipe out the whole Western United States. The safest place for long-term water is the east side or the Smoky Mountains. Cool. That's definitely something that you need to think about. Who knows when Yellowstone will go up, but it will probably go up. It might not be in our lifetimes, but it might be. So that's certainly something you need to consider. And if it goes up in a big way, it's a super volcano. If it goes up in a big way, you won't be annihilated. Like everyone in that sort of Western area, I think will just be annihilated. But the effects of that happening will be felt by every single individual on the face of the earth. The amount of stuff it's going to put into our atmosphere will essentially create a nuclear winter type scenario, I think, if that was to go up. But yeah, and then you got predominant winds and prevailing winds and winds effects at that point as well. I'm not sure where it goes in the US. I haven't looked at this recently. I did look at it a little while ago, but I don't know if the prevailing winds are actually going to push it towards that area. So it's not pushing it east. I think it's actually pushing it west, off memory. That's in Australia. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me. Take the ride. Do the research. Teach me. I'm always down to be taught stuff. Always wanting to learn stuff, new stuff. Russian propaganda. Here's some Russian propaganda for you. US quietly urging firms to buy Russian fertilizer to ease prices. So apparently US, Uncle Joe's going, hey, he's doing his weird whispering thing, and we need some fertilizers. You just buy the fertilizer off the Russians for now. Obviously, fertilizer there's a massive shortage going on at the moment. This is sorry, my dog just started chewing on my leg. This is a big deal. I've talked about it ad nauseum. This is huge. It's going to have massive implications for world food shortages. Just because of the system we use a lot of fertilizer to feed a lot of people. We need to take back those systems to ourselves again. If we're gardening, we don't need necessarily fertilizer. If we're growing some of our own food. But, you know, again, I'm always watching the different sources and what's going on. Is this just Russian propaganda bullshit? Possibly, but it's not. I put this one up here because this is not outside the realm of possibility. This is actually probably closer to probability in my mind that the US is actually telling its firms, like, they're coming out and saying, we must stop Russia. So we're sanctioning everything from Russia. Hey, just keep getting that oil because our oil reserves are low. And by the way, if you guys can't make food, just get some fertilizer off Russia. We will stop everything from Russia. Again, I think it's US policymakers here throwing out stuff that hurts other people, the people who are really hurting at the moment. Europe, as far as energy, and North Africa as far as food. It's going to be bad for them. So Magnolia Homestead was talking about some of the policies that the current US regime has put into place that are affecting fuel prices. But here's something else. In order to, this is like such a, like, well, if we use this to plug this hole, and then people are like, well, but this is missing. Oh, we'll use this to plug this hole, and this to plug that, and that to plug that, and they're just, you know, constantly in this juggling thing. So here's another thing, right? Biden's come out. You know, I won't go into too much depth with this, but in the US, they say you can use this much ethanol in your fuel at this time and this much in this time. Well, Biden came out and said, no, just increase it to the same all around. And that it's to do with like smog and pollution and things like that, and a number of other factors. But anyway, ethanol doesn't just come out of the fucking air. It's grown from plants. They pull it out of plants, which means they're growing that on growing food land. So they're taking up land that could be used for food for human consumption, and they're growing fuel for cars in it. So there is a number of people who are coming out right now and saying, hey, Biden's mandates for increased production of ethanol are, the wording here is wrong-headed. It's a sweet way of putting it. I think that's wrong-headed. It's asinine. Florida and Georgia should definitely be on your list, on my list of places to go. Then definitely, I mean, Florida, yeah, Florida, I'd be interested to go there. I'm not a big fan of hot, sticky weather. That's why I don't live in Queensland. But you know, I'd love to go down there and check it out. Maybe try and get there and catch a bit of Tom Brady flicking the ball around. But Georgia, definitely want to get to Georgia. Love to check that place out. I've bounced through Atlanta a couple of times, but never got out and stretched my legs there. So it's definitely that whole place around there I want to go check out. In fact, I want to go walk the Appalachian Trail. I've got grand aspirations of doing the Triple Crown. So I want to start around there. I want to go check out. In fact, I want to go walk the Appalachian Trail. I've got grand aspirations of doing the Triple Crown. So I want to start with the Appalachians and go there. But who knows? Not this year by the looks of it. Anyway, so again, I want to just point this out. A dubious policy in the best of times, but at a time of critical global food shortages, it's obscene. This has been something that has been thrown out there for a long time for people who are proponents of ethanol, just saying, hey, let's just switch to ethanol. Let's get rid of petrol, and then everything is fixed, and we live in this utopian future. And if you've ever listened to me before talk about this, I'm always really, it's like a massive red flag. In fact, it's like a freaking siren. Anytime anyone goes like, and then we'll have a perfect society, and then we'll live in a utopia. I'm always like, this sounds socialist or communist, and like, and then we'll live in a utopia. I'm always like, this sounds socialist or communist, and like, I don't like it. And I don't believe in a utopian society. I don't. I think struggle is part of human nature, and I think we need struggle to a certain extent. And anyone who is seeking something that is the absence of struggle is not only seeking something that is outside of what human nature is, but is seeking something that is impossible to obtain, in my belief. So ethanol, yeah, let's just run cars off ethanol from now on. It's like, no, that was never going to work. That was never an option. And it's certainly not going to work now when we're staring down the barrel of a food crisis, which will mean the death of at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of human beings that are currently alive right now, and won't be in 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 years' time. That's the reality of what we're facing right now with the scale of the food shortage that we're looking at. And we're already pretty far down that path. If things were to change today, we could maybe mitigate some of those losses a little bit, but those losses are still there. That's already written in right now. This food shortage is here. It just hasn't hit a lot of us yet. So anything that I think is taking food out of the mouth of people, anything that's taking arable land that could be used for food creation is a very, very bad idea, very disturbing idea. Take the ride. What do you think about the polar shift occurring? It's possible. I mean, and I don't really know what, like, that could be a not just a civilization event, that could be a species ending event if there is a polar shift. So that, for those who don't know what that means, we've got a magnetic poles on the Earth that occur because of a few different factors, but the Earth spinning and what it's created on the inside. And basically that magnetic poles that push out then create a buffer around the Earth, because we're constantly being bombarded by things, shit from around the universe, but mainly from our sun. Our sun's just plying us with all sorts of solar radiation, all sorts of stuff. So anyway, part of that, the buffer against that, is this magnetic bubble around us. Every so often, and it has happened before, these start to move, and then they go, and we're shifting. But it's not just like bing, shift. This happens over a bit of time, and when that does shift, it means that magnetic bubble around us is no longer there. It's no longer like operating in the same way that it should be. So, you know, we're open and exposed to a whole heap of things. If it does happen, like, the insanity that would ensue is, I think, on such a level where it's almost to the point where it's like, well, do you bother? So whenever I'm looking at preparedness, I look at it from a risk management model. I look at likelihood and consequence. What's the likelihood of this happening? What's the consequence? What's the likelihood of an asteroid hitting, you know, the planet that destroys us? I would say it's very low. But the thing is, here, if consequence is high enough, you should always start to have a plan for it. You should always think about it. So the likelihood of me being caught in an active shooter event is low, but the consequence is potentially life-threatening to me. So I do think about it, and I do plan and operate around that being a reality. However, there's a tipping point for consequence for me as well. So consequential that I'm like, well, does it even matter? All right, if an asteroid hits and it wipes out life as we know it, then I don't really need to plan for that. There's very little I can do about that. All right, unless I build some sort of super bunker system, but I don't have the resources for that. So at that point, I'm just like, well, I can't plan for this. Polar shift might be one of those things. It's also something that I can do nothing about, really. So what do I think the likelihood of it happening is? Or what do I think about it occurring? I mean, again, this is a possibility that could happen, but that's something that I'm just going to have to cross that bridge if and when it happens. So there was a really interesting book. So you've just made a comment here. The ash will destroy the water. I think you're trying to say, and the animals in the vegetation. The ash from the Yellowstone explosion. Ash from Yellowstone will travel east and south, covering most of the United States, wiping out all clean water and vegetation and destroying the animals for food. 2 places would be safe: east side of Pikes Peak, and you'd be cut off in the east side of the Great Smoky Mountains. Everywhere else would fail. Cool. I'm not super familiar with those spots. They're twigging something in my memory. Pikes Peak, especially. I'm not sure why, but two fictional books I would really recommend for people to think about big scale events. They're, as I said, they're both fictional books, but I find them really good. One's called Grey. I can't remember the author. There's probably a ton of books called Grey, right? Grey, and it's about some event that happens in the US, and it's probably something like this. It's either an asteroid hits or the volcano goes up, but essentially a whole heap of ash comes down and covers the earth, and there's all the consequences from that. So the author outlines like how somebody sort of lives and survives, and how hard it would actually be to survive in a situation like that. The other one is 1 Second After, which is about EMPs in particular, but it's kind of the fallout of like, oh, hey, we don't have anything electrical anymore, and what society does at that point, or what one town does in the US. Really super interesting, because we often think about that, oh yeah, these bad things happen, and I'm going to, fight the zombie apocalypse or whatever in my town. But, you've got hundreds of thousands to millions to even billions possibly of people, depending where you are on Earth, that are going to be in a pretty desperate situation, fighting for limited resources. And so that's a pretty big effect. Human effect is always bigger than the rest of them. It is always bigger than the rest of them. I think I missed some questions or some comments here. Corn is our largest ethanol source here, and ethanol isn't great for many engines here. Yeah. Yep. Engines that are built off oils using what is essentially alcohol in them. Unsurprisingly, it doesn't work too well for them. Off oils using what is essentially alcohol in them. Unsurprisingly, it doesn't work too well for them. But thank you for the offer, and I will certainly try and get over to the USA sometime soon. I just had to make the choice this year. Now that I am kind of sort of allowed to leave my own country again, the penal colony that is Australia, I had to make the choice, and I made the decision to go to Sweden this year to learn some skills, to learn how to axe, build some houses. So that's what I'm doing. All right, that's it for today, gang. Thank you very much. This is a much longer one than I thought it would be. I've been talking for a long time. Wow. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for the comments. So thanks, Rambodian, and thanks, Take the Ride. Always appreciate it. Thank you to, who made comments on here? A few people did, but Magnolia Homestead was probably the main one. Thanks to everyone else who made comments. It's too far up for me to look at. Thanks everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it. Always love your comments. Always love any questions or anything that you put in there. Always love information that you give me too, so that I can learn, because that's what this format, this whole thing is all about for me, is a shared resource so that we can all become better, more self-reliant and more prepared human beings for whatever comes in the future, whether it be good, whether it be tough. But yeah, as always, gang, if you got any questions, shoot them through to me, please. Keep prepping and stay safe out there. Semper Paratus.